Hey guys, this is Matt Invictus. A couple weeks ago, DC released an art book. The whole issue was just pinups of Batman and Catwoman by various artists. And if you look real closely, you might notice this art book actually had a plot in it as well. And the plot was that Catwoman abandoned Batman on their wedding day because she felt like marrying him would make him too happy to be Batman, so she left him. And usually I start these types of videos with a spoiler warning, but I don't need to do that because the New York Times already spoiled that for everyone in the headline, so that wouldn't be necessary. The Batman number 50, the wedding issue, was a disaster. Pretty much everyone agrees it was a disaster. The issue itself was boring as hell. Like I said, it was mostly just pinups of Batman and Catwoman. Most of them looked nice, but the plot itself, the segments that even bothered to have a plot, were mostly boring. And then at the end, Selina left Bruce. Now, the decision to have Selina leave Bruce was horrible on many levels. First of all, her reasoning was awful. It was basically that she felt that their marriage would give Batman too much happiness and that he'd be unable to be Batman in spite of it. It doesn't make sense. First of all, Bruce Wayne already has multiple bonds with people. Alfred, Damian, Dick, Tim, Superman. For a character who sometimes has a reputation with a loner, he actually does have one of the most extensive supporting casts of any superhero. He has bonds, family bonds with many characters. He's surrounded by people who make him happier than he would be. So the idea that their marriage would kill his drive does not make sense. And also, there's the idea that marriage does not take away a person's problems. In fact, marrying someone, it opens up a whole set of new problems. So for Selina Kyle to believe that Bruce marrying her would make him so happy that his problems would magically disappear, he'd lose his drive to be Batman, is ridiculous. Does not begin to make sense. So the way I see it, the character of Catwoman is the comics version of Catwoman is absolutely ruined. She is, at the moment, one of Batman's greatest villains for her selfish actions and her lack of logic. And there's a new Catwoman book out right now, and I don't even care. There's no way I can care about a version of Selina who is this reprehensible, because all right, or Batman proposed to her, she accepted the proposal, she puts him through all this build up to the wedding, assuring him it'll happen, and then when the day comes, she just abandons him, and she just this in the most patronizing way. She says, "You're just a child, Bruce, and giving myself to you will make you so happy that you'll lose your drive." Just what's a reprehensible human being. Again, she is one of Batman's worst villains, one of the worst things to ever happen to him. So at the moment, there is no way I can give a damn about Catwoman anymore. They successfully ruined this character for me, and that really sucks. So the wedding issue was a massive failure, but the thing is, DC had screwed up the Batcat wedding long before this issue came out. The actual wedding was destined to be a failure no matter what. The wedding issue, that was just the moment where everyone realized they had fucked things up. So, first of all, there's a way they wrote Bruce and Selina's relationship. Now, in the past, the Batcat relationship was interesting because the two characters are on equal footing. They're both portrayed as individuals with serious problems. They're both really fucked up in their own way, and they need each other because they're both fucked up. And I also liked the idea that they both needed each other, but they could never actually be together. I found that interesting, but I was open to the idea of Bruce and Selina getting married, so I wasn't opposed to the idea from the start. I lost my investment in it based on how their relationship was actually written, because Batman writer Tom King, he wrote the relationship as thus. Selina Kyle, his Catwoman was the most boringly perfect version of Catwoman I have ever seen. Like, virtually no flaws throughout the majority of his run. She's just this perfect woman. The only issues where she really came off as a flawed person were the last two. In one, she like kind of almost lost a fight with a Joker, but then ended up winning. And then in the wedding issue, where she became one of the most horrible people in the world by abandoning Bruce on their wedding day. But for the most part, she was just written as perfect Catwoman, like very, just not compelling in the slightest. And then there's his Batman. How do I put this? Tom King's Batman was an unbelievable wimp. This is the most passive version of Batman I've ever read. The least aggressive, least intimidating, least competent. And a lot of people will defend his take on Batman by saying he's making him more human. He's giving him more emotional depth. But that's not even remotely true. He's not more complex. He doesn't have more depth than older versions of the character. He's just a lot more spineless. And again, Bruce, very interesting because of his flaws. He's like, he can be overly aggressive. He can be very standoffish, paranoid. But I saw less of these features in his character than I have before. So he didn't give Batman more depth. He did the opposite. He took away his depth. He took this character that I personally find pretty interesting and turned him into a spineless dork. And that's not to say that he hasn't done anything impressive or badass throughout this run. There have been moments, but for the most part, he was just unbelievably lame. People have nicknamed this version of Bruce Batcuck, which I find amusing. So basically, they took the Batman-Catwoman relationship, something that did have potential, and reduced it to a perfect woman and a Batcuck. So you can kind of see why I lost investment in the marriage very quickly, and it also didn't help that the run itself, the stories and the writing, were not very good either. I've talked about King's Batman in the past, why it was a huge disappointment for me. It's like a Batman run made up of filler. It's like there have been for the first part of the run, there were just like filler issue after filler issue. There would only be a handful of pages per arc where important stuff happened, but it was mostly just padding and horrible dialogue that tried to be clever and witty, but ended up just being obnoxious. And then the pacing started to pick up a little bit towards the end of the run, but to compensate for that, the writing also became even worse. I mean, they devoted an entire 3 issues to this completely worthless Poison Ivy arc that didn't need to happen. All that accomplished was this horrendous scene of Catwoman taking down 3 Flashes all by herself. And that part in Total Recall where the bad guy's face is exploding and his eyeballs pop out of his head. That was me when Catwoman took down 3 Flashes at once. So wasted our time with a 3-issue Poison Ivy arc didn't need to happen. That horrible Booster Gold arc, which is one of the worst Batman stories of all time. The Gift, the Booster Gold story, it destroyed my ability to trust Tom King with any DC character. And I'm not saying he's always a bad writer. He is capable of writing good stuff, but after those last few Batman arcs, he just destroyed my ability to trust him with a project ever again. So the build up to the wedding was a big disappointment. They did not use it as an opportunity to really flesh out their relationship, really analyze what Bruce and Selina meant to each other. They didn't really do any of that. It was just a series of increasingly stupid adventures with Batman and Catwoman as a team. So I was in no way excited for the wedding issue, but DC had to go and ruin it for everyone who was excited by not just pulling the plug on the wedding, but also with all the false advertising, because they, in the solicitations and everything, they made it seem